Okay, today we're going to talk about presidential powers and the expansion of power under the president. In the Constitution, it lists several defined powers for the president. For example, the president is head of state, which means he's in charge of foreign policy decisions, in particular the treaty power, although again that is shared with the United States Senate. And especially while overseas, the president represents the United States to the world. The president is commander-in-chief, which means he is the civilian head of the military. He's in charge of hiring and firing the top generals and admirals, and in charge of telling the military what its defined duties are. In addition to that, there are several other specific jobs he appoints. For example, the head of the CIA, head of the secretaries of the cabinet, including Homeland Security, who has a particular role in national defense. One area that's surprising for a lot of students is the president is considered the chief legislator, and even though he is not obviously in Congress, he has a lot of defined legislative powers. The most important is the ability to veto laws. So he himself has the ability to stop any legislation he doesn't like, which is in a sense more power than most members of Congress. Although he doesn't have power to create legislation, he can write legislation and send it to Congress. Only a single member of Congress can actually introduce the legislation to the body. So he has to get a friend over there to introduce the legislation for him. Recently, the president has been given budget powers. Every year the president writes a budget, sends it to Congress, and Congress is supposed to use this as kind of a framework for planning its appropriations bills for the rest of the year. However, it tends not to be taken very seriously. The last budget that President Obama sent over to the Senate, for example, was voted down 97-0, and the Senate decided to create its own budget. So the battle over who gets to decide what money is spent continues as a separation of powers issue. These are some of the formal powers for president. There are some informal powers that have been added over time. For example, now that we have a party system, which didn't exist when the Constitution was written, the president is considered the head of his party. So if obviously the president's Republican, he's the head Republican in the country, or Democrats, the same thing. Presidents are responsible for trying to create legislative majorities for their party in Congress and for governors and other state entities. They tend to be important for fundraising. If the president comes in and does a speech or some sort of fundraiser in your district, helps get the member of Congress, the member of the Senate, the senator or the governor some money to help for his election campaign. It's also a very important skill. Most of our recent presidents have been effective mostly because they've been very good at raising money. President Obama has broken records in terms of how much money he's been able to raise, which has been one of his successes as president. In addition, the president for the last 100 years or so has been considered the leader of the economy. So when the economy is good, the president is given usually high job approval ratings, and when the economy is bad, the president tends to get low approval ratings. Not that the president can directly control the economy, but many people give him that. They think he has that kind of power. He does have some specific powers over the economy, though, in the sense that he can he appoints the chairman of the Federal Reserve, our national bank system, which can set interest rates and print money and things like that that do affect the economy. And the president obviously sets the tone of the legislation passed in Congress that can have either positive or negative effects on the economy. Okay, the next section we have here has to do with how presidents have actually expanded the role of the presidency over time. The president started out under George Washington as a fairly limited role, taking a back seat to Congress. At this point, the president is considered the lead on most issues, and Congress is taking a back seat. And that transition has taken several hundred years of incremental work by presidents who have kind of pushed to get more and more power. So I've run through a few of them here. For example, President Jackson starts off by being the first president to claim a mandate, being the first president to claim that he represents the view of the people because he was elected nationwide. He's also the first president to be elected after the property ownership requirement for voters has been removed by most states. So he's the first one who can actually claim that a large number of people voted for him and therefore he had a mandate. At the time, he thinks the central government has too much power, so he actually he doesn't let the National Bank be renewed, and he's the first president to ever veto a bill just because he didn't like it. Previous to that, presidents would only veto bills because they thought they were unconstitutional. In addition, Jackson is the one, along with his vice president, his second vice president, Martin Van Buren, to create the modern political party system, so he gets a lot of credit for that. Next up, we have Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt is a president who uses the power of the presidency to enhance his own reelection opportunities. He's the first to use the media, national media, through the newspapers to go directly to the people if he wants something. Presidents before Roosevelt had to go through Congress to get to the people, but by the time President Roosevelt is president in 1901, you have because of the telegraph and communications, newspapers go throughout the nation and can broadcast information very quickly. In addition, after President Roosevelt, other presidents have used the media effectively, and the effective presidents have always been ones who've been able to use the most current and advanced technology of their time. So, for example, his cousin, Franklin Roosevelt, was very successful in part because he sounded really good on the radio, which was the new modern technology of the time. He had a lovely radio voice, which at that point most Americans owned a radio, and again, he could speak directly to the people. Fast forward to President Kennedy. He's particularly credited for being the first president to recognize the value of television. The 1960 presidential debate was the first televised presidential debate, and John Kennedy, for those Americans who saw the debate on television, they thought Kennedy did a much better job than Nixon. Nixon looked nervous and sweaty and uncomfortable, although he sounded okay, but Kennedy projected this air of calm demeanor and expertise, and so people who saw him on TV thought he did much better, and that helped him win the election. Fast forward another generation, you have Ronald Reagan, who always looked good on TV. He just had a knack for charisma for being very good on television based on his experience and background as an actor. President George W. Bush was effective in part because he used the internet and email, which was all new technology at the time he was president. And now President Barack Obama is very successful in part because he uses Twitter. I think he's one of the top 5 followed people on Twitter at this point, and uses Facebook. You can see his little advertisements popping up all the time on Facebook these days. Each president who's able to master the new technology of communication that's available to him is able to get his message out to the people, and therefore it makes him much more effective as a leader, helps him get elected first of all, but then also helps him lead once he's in office.